Welcome to the Swazzle Puppet Studio. I'm Sean.
And I'm Patrick.
In our last episode, we showed you how to create custom fleece patterns.
In this episode, we'll show you the invisible stitch we use to sew puppet fleece.
Let's get started! Now that we've created our fleece patterns, it's time to trace them onto our custom dyed fleece, cut them out, and stitch them together with a top secret invisible stitch.
We'll also add some finishing touches to take our Herrick the Elephant puppet over the finish line. For this step, you will need your custom dyed puppet fleece, your custom made puppet patterns, pattern weights, a Sharpie, preferably one that's close to the color of your fleece, scissors, pins, a needle and thread, and your foam puppet parts. You'll also need some contact cement and small applicators. Use the pen to trace your head and body patterns. Don't trace the arms and legs just yet. We'll get to those in a minute. Carefully cut the pieces out, trimming on the inside of the pen line. Pin the pieces together, lining up your registration marks. Before we start sewing, let's talk about puppet fleece. Think of puppet fleece like carpet. There are two parts to it, a soft fuzzy front and a smooth stretchy back. Now let's talk about the top secret invisible stitch we use to sew puppet fleece.
It's called a whip stitch, and it's not top secret at all. In fact, it's one of the most common hand stitches used.
So how do you make it invisible? Like this. Start by threading your needle. We like to double the thread up. Tie a knot and trim off the extra. Flip the puppet fleece over so the wrong side is up. Place the pieces of fleece that you're going to sew together so they are flush. Stitch them together, pushing the needle through one side of the material backing, then the next. Continue in this fashion.
Make sure you're only sewing the backing of the fleece and not the soft fibers on top. This will make your stitch more invisible.
The more careful you are, the more invisible your stitch will be. Use the whip stitch to sew your large puppet fleece parts together, like the body and the head. After these pieces are sewn together, flip them right side out. You can also use a pin to pick out any fibers that have been drawn into the stitch. Smaller puppet parts, like arms and legs, can be sewn by hand, but we prefer to use a sewing machine.
Hand stitching tiny fingers is a real pain.
Trace your arm and hand pattern onto a large piece of puppet fleece. It should be big enough so you can fold the material in half. Pin the fleece. Thread up your sewing machine and sew on the pen line. Leave the shoulder open so you can flip the material right side out when you're done. When sewing your hands, be sure to keep the rod pocket open. Cut out the arms and hands. Trim as close to the stitch as possible without cutting the seam. Turn the material right side out and use a pin to pull out any fibers to help hide the seam. You can use the same technique for legs, ears, or any other small puppet parts. Pull the sewn fleece over the foam.
Use the gluing technique that we demonstrated in this episode to glue the fleece to the foam where needed, such as around the lips or around the neck.
Use a small applicator like these when gluing the fleece around a puppet's mouth. Work slowly and carefully, and remember to follow all manufacturers' safety guidelines when using contact cement. Now your puppet is completely covered with fleece. Let's add some finishing touches. Every puppet is different. For Herrick the elephant, we added eyes, eyebrows, glasses, a tongue, a tail, and hair. And of course, a custom-made costume. Now you know all the steps we use to turn an original character design into a final puppet.
Be sure to like and subscribe for more puppet building tips. And we'll see you next time in the Swazzle Puppet Studio. Goodbye!